their asset column. So that's the fact right here. It's a mortgage here. And the way you know it's an asset, and they list it that way. I'm not telling you something that they list it that way. The way you know it's an asset is because your mortgage puts money in their pocket. And your mortgage takes money from your pocket. You see, it actually goes like this. It's a complete circle. Now, so that's why they're not lying to you. It's just saying, they're not saying whose asset it is, it's theirs. Now, the other part about it is when you save money over here, it's really your asset. Now, if a balance sheet must balance, it has to balance someplace else. You go to the bank, where does it balance? Bank. But is it their asset or their liability? It's their liability. Your savings are their liability. Notice that? Because they have to pay you money for your money. And it's cash flow determines that. Now, if you notice something else too, you get tax incentives to be in what? Debt, and you're taxed for having savings. And that's why I say, how can we tax savings? Is because you're not smart enough yet. The banks know, political action committees, they control, the rules are written by the rich. I'm not saying I love my bankers. I love them dearly. But you have to know the difference between assets and liabilities and whose rules you're playing by. Poor, middle class, or the rich. Got it? I'm going to talk about a subject that's getting nearer and dearer to many of my peers' hearts lately. And the subject is retirement, or the lack of the ability to retire. So I said the way I retired early has to do with the issue of this. Debt versus what? Equity. The reason I could retire early was because I'm in debt. I borrowed my butt off to retire early. The average person is going to take to 65, 75 as long as possible because they're trying to retire on what? Equity. In other words, they're going to try and use their hard-earned cash to retire, where I would rather use the bank's money to retire. So I am in debt up to my eyeballs. Because the reason is and I know some of you are there, because I'm sure some of your parents told you to get out of what? Debt. Well, that's not that intelligent. Because you have to know there's good debt and what? Bad debt. And most people are loaded with what? Bad debt. And if you want to get rich, load up with what? Good debt. And the question I asked those bankers, I said, let me ask you this. How long would it take you to save $1 million? I'll ask you guys, how long would it take you to save $1 million? A couple of years at least, right? Yeah. How long does it take you to borrow $1 million? About 10 minutes. If you have good financials. And that's the difference. And that's the price people pay for not being educated in this world, to think that they have to work hard, save money, and finance your retirement on equity. I'd rather do it on debt. And the way I do it on debt is my banker will always lend me money on a thing called real estate. Always. They will not lend me money to buy stocks, but they will, even if it's, bank of, what stock, their own stock, they won't lend me $1 million for 30 years at 8%. But if I find a commercial building, $1 million, 8%, 30, they'll all day long. The thing that scares me right now is never have so many people in the history of the world bet their retirement on the stock market. And they've bet real money. Am I correct? And trust me, the market will crash. Always has, and always will. Now, those taking deep breaths right now, it's because you're not, because that should be good news. Because if it crashes, that's when you get rich. But the people who have been trained to think of playing it safe and all this, they're going to be in terror. Completely different point of view. So the point I'm making here is this. One of the reasons I wanted to get educated, understand cash flow, play the game, was just so I could borrow money faster. When my poor dad always said to get out of debt. Debt was bad. So I just called, I just called my broker down the street here. I said, I need 2.4. He says, come in and sign the paperwork. That was it. 2.4 million, just sign. Now, because I can take that money and make 10 million out of it. The average person will go on vacation with it. Or buy a big house, or buy a boat. It's called fiduciary responsibility. If you can prove you know how to manage your money and you have the good financials, plus you have a couple of million in cash, they'll lend you all the money you want. Because they know my problem is too much money. And the reason I buy real estate is because I get more tax breaks. The real estate is a game of the rich, not paper. It's a really interesting world. So what I'm going to go into is how you can get to the point where you don't, I'm not recommending just go out and borrow today, especially if you have no education. I spent 40 years getting here to the point where I can call my broker up. Before, 10 years ago, I'd call them up and they'd laugh. How much do you want? Well, I took that as a feedback that I had to improve my financials. Does that make sense to you guys here? To the point where they would say yes. So the difference between my poor dad and my rich dad was this. My poor dad always said, get a high-paying what? Job. Big mistake. Because the trouble with a high-paying job is you get taxed. So my rich dad said, that was my poor dad, high-income job. That was the key to success. That's a very middle-class, pedestrian point of view. The rich know this. It's not how much money you make. It's how much money you keep. You've got to keep it. It is not how much you make. It's how much you keep. It's called the income to expense ratio. In other words, how much drops to your bottom line. Does that make sense to you guys here? Yes. How much drops? So the minimum is 30%. So you're making $1,000, the minimum that can drop is 30%. If you're not going 30% to the bottom line, in other words, this way, and you don't have to do it, I'm just giving you the ratios that work. If you have $1,000 coming in this way, then 300 needs to hit here somehow. That's the ratio. The average person, you know how much is hitting here? Nothing. That's why they're poor. They're making more and more money, a high-paying job, I went to the university to get a high-paying job. And I'm now at GS-19, and I'm getting more money, but less is dropping here. Does that make sense to you guys here? Because they're buying more what? Liability. It's called the income to expense ratio. How much is dropping? That's what counts. I listened to Sir John Templeton. He said when he first got married, for every 1,000 that came in, 500 hit here. That's what makes the rich rich. It's not how much they make, it's how much they keep. It's a matter of focus. And my poor dad always said, I'm making more money. My rich dad says, I'm keeping more money. Big difference. Huge difference in long-term wealth. It's how much is hitting this here. So the thing I have is an exercise that'll prove that anybody can be rich. And when I was a little kid, my rich dad gave me one of these. He gave me 3 of these little things. They're called what? Piggy banks. So if you want to get rich, go out and buy 3 of them. Okay? 3 piggy banks. That's all it takes to train yourself to think to be rich. Now, for every piggy bank, so you have 1 piggy bank, 2 piggy banks, 3 piggy banks. 1 is for saving, 1's for investing, and 1 is for tithing or charity. Very important to give. The decision you make today, I'm talking about choices. You can say, well, that's too simple, But the choice you make is for the rest of my life, or for the next 90 days, whatever you can handle, how much am I going to put in each bank every day? Not once a week. Every single day. Because what you're training is your brain to think like and act like and be like a rich person. You're dropping it to the bottom line. So, let's say the most you can handle today, given your horrific financial brilliance, is $1. Good. Now, I don't care the dollar amount, but I do care that you do it. It's like going to the gym and saying, today I look like a sumo wrestler, but tonight I'll look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's not possible, It's not going to happen. So how many people right now could say for the rest of your life, with 3 piggy banks, you'll put $1 a day away per bank? Good, right? And everybody can do it. But the problem is, most people won't. And that's the difference. But once it hits your piggy bank, it's yours for the rest of your life. You pass it on for generations. That's what the rich do. The middle class finds some cheap and tacky excuse to break the bank. Am I correct? I got to spend this money. That was my poor dad. well, if I make more money, I'll get a pay raise next year. The government, you know, be a GS 19.5. But they kept